Good morning, everyone. I'm Allie Whittlesey, AFP Chicago Secretary and Assistant Executive Director for the Foundation for Endodontics. On behalf of AFP Chicago's Continuous Learning Council, thank you for registering and participating in today's virtual workshop. During these difficult and uncharted times, it's extremely important that we all come together and learn from one another. Our hope is that you can learn not only from our speakers today, but from each other's shared experiences. In an effort to try and keep as much normalcy as possible, we always acknowledge our current Fellows class at each of our in-person programs. The Fellows program was created in 2004 to offer development professionals both educational resources and the collective professional expertise of our membership. Each of these individuals represent our rich and diverse Chicago philanthropy community. Normally at this point, we would ask our fellows to stand. To our fellows, class of 2020, we're glad that you're with us today. This year, AFP Chicago began to offer a sponsorship opportunity called the IDEA Educational Scholarship. This scholarship enables deserving individuals who identify themselves or work within a community that represents a diverse population, including racial, ethnic minorities, LGBTQ, and/or the disabled. IDEA scholarship recipients will attend all of our educational workshops. We are pleased to announce that Campbell & Company is our first IDEA Educational Scholarship Fund sponsor. Because of them, we are welcoming several additional people to our program this morning. Thank you to our friends at Campbell & Company. Today, we bring together three well-respected nonprofit professionals to speak with you and lead discussions on a variety of topics pertinent to the nonprofit organizations. No one has all the answers during these completely unique circumstances, but today we will look past the right now to help you persevere and move your organization forward and plan for the future. With us today is Walanda Cannon, Senior Director of Development at Breakthrough Urban Ministries, who will be addressing stewardship and donor communication. Jill Zimmerman, Vice President of Development at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, who will be discussing rebooting your financial targets. And finally, Kathy Slaughter, Vice President of Development at the YWCA Evanston North Shore, who will address special events. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to share. To keep our audio as clear as possible, we have intentionally muted all of your lines. If you would like to ask a question of the speaker in your breakout session, we ask that you follow these instructions. Click on the participants icon at the bottom ribbon of your Zoom screen. Then click the raise hand button, which is a blue hand. It simply puts a hand icon beside your username and lets the session facilitator know that you have a question. When the raised hand function is used, the facilitator will identify the question asker by name and unmute the attendee, allowing them to ask their question. Now we will hear from each of our presenters for just a few moments, one by one, before beginning our 30-minute breakout sessions in the topic area that you pre-selected when you registered for the event. Following the breakout sessions, we will come back together for each group to share key takeaways and themes from the discussion. First up, we'll hear from Walanda Cannon from Breakthrough Urban Ministries. Walanda, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Allie, and thank you. Good morning, everybody. Oh my gosh, welcome to our new way of life, right? I almost feel afraid to say that comfortably, but it's been about 6 weeks now. So, wow, who knew back in January when we were celebrating 2020 that our May would be looking like this? But just an applause to each of you all for braving through it. If your organizations are anything like Breakthrough, your world has been turned upside down, and hopefully you've been able to find some silver linings in this tremendous time. As Allie mentioned, my name is Walanda Cannon. I am Senior Director of Development for Breakthrough. I started in Breakthrough in 2014, so really excited to be a part of this community and people. I live in the community, and a little bit about who we are. Our mission is to really come alongside people who've been impacted by poverty to build connections, develop skills, and open doors of opportunity. the way that manifests in our community, what I really like to say is several nonprofits in the city of Chicago may do one thing in many places. At Breakthrough, our approach is to do many things in one place, and that's within 40 blocks in the East Garfield Park area. We have several programs by which we serve those who are seniors and the most vulnerable in our population, all the way to our preschool. And so we have 2 homeless shelters, 1 for men and 1 for women. We have permanent supportive housing throughout the city that serves, where we partner with landlords to serve both individuals and families who are impacted by homelessness. We have a fresh market food pantry. And we also have our Breakthrough Familyplex, where we serve, have 4 preschool classrooms, a gymnasium, arts and science wing, and an after school wing as well. We serve probably about 13,000 people right now within this 40 block zone, and are really, really proud to come alongside them to restore dignity and give everybody an honoring voice here in our community. Today, I'll be talking about in my breakout session some really key factors that helped us to pivot and adjust and speak to what was happening in our community and honor the voices, some things that we did pre-COVID, and I want to spend some time talking about that. We'll talk about what worked and what was the strongest approach that we saw. And then we'll also look at the future and how we're thinking about it, given the state that we're in. So thanks everybody for joining. I look forward to seeing you in the breakout session.
Thank you, Wanda. Next, we will hear from Jill Zimmerman with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Jill?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to AFP for hosting this webinar today. I wish I could actually be in every session, because I think that there's a ton I could learn from all the panelists and from all the participants today. I'm going to talk a bit about the Food Depository, who we are as an organization, and then the topic that I'll be covering in today's breakout session. But if you're not familiar with who we are, we're the food bank that serves Cook County. We've really been in the spotlight recently, particularly because the need has grown so significantly in the last, 8 weeks plus since COVID-19 really came into the forefront in Chicago. There are 7 other food banks in the state of Illinois, and we're all part of a national organization called Feeding America. I know that there are members of the Food Depository team participating in some of the breakout sessions, as well as Feeding America. So I'm really glad that that's the case. And in terms of what we've been doing, we've been on the front lines addressing the need in our community, which, as I said, has grown. Prior to COVID-19, we were serving about 800,000 people annually. And we've seen about a 60% increase in the number of individuals being served by food pantries and shelters and soup kitchens in Cook County. A couple things that I would say. One is that we've been incredibly grateful to the level of support that we've seen, not only from our partner organizations, but also from the community at large, from donors. And our team has done just an incredible job of being out there and responding. I don't profess to know all the answers, and I hope that during the breakout session that to the extent that we can have a little bit more interactive conversation, I think that would be really wonderful. The 3 things that I'm going to be talking about is how do we navigate through the now, and I'll share a little bit about what we've done with the Food Depository from that standpoint. The second is how do we plan for the recovery? What does that look like financially in terms of planning in the future? And then finally, how can we lead in this new normal? What are the skill sets and things that we need to take into consideration? Okay, Allie, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jill.
Sure.
Finally, we'll hear from Ms. Kathy Slaughter with YWCA of Evanston North Shore. Kathy?
Yes, hi. Hello, everyone. It's really great to be here this morning. I'm Kathy Slaughter, Vice President of Development with YWCA, Evanston North Shore. I've been at the YWCA for about 10 years now. Just a little bit about what we do. We are a social justice organization. We focus on eliminating racism and empowering women. There are about 200 YWCAs across the country, including, actually there are 3 right here in the Chicago area. We all share the same mission with a slightly different programmatic focus. At YWCA Evanston North Shore, our main program is domestic violence services. We operate a DV shelter. We have transitional housing. We have legal advocacy and other programs for women that are survivors of domestic violence. We also have a large economic empowerment program, racial justice program, and an aquatics program, which many YWCAs have across the country. Like many of you, we have had to pivot in this new environment of COVID-19, and we are learning. We are learning very quickly. We're learning how to deliver our programs differently, and still serve the people that we need to serve. We're also learning how to do fundraising. And specifically, this morning, I'd like to talk about special events. I have to say from the beginning, of course, we don't have all the answers. And special events are hard, I think, in the best of times. And they are especially hard now. But we are learning. We have 3 major special events, and I'm going to talk about our largest one in the breakout session, which is the Race Against Hate. But we just completed one which is called Stand Against Racism, which is actually an awareness raiser. It's not a fundraiser. So we didn't have the pressure of having to raise money, but we did have the pressure of how do you put on a large live event and still get people to participate when they are sheltering at home. The Stand is it's actually a national YWCA event that happens in the last week of April. Not every YW participates, but we've actually been doing it for about 8 years. And the idea is that we really want to involve the community in understanding racism, understanding their own personal responsibility in terms of building racial equity, and then making a personal commitment to doing that. So every year in April, we convene about 8,000 people to line the streets of Evanston and Skokie, and they come out with banners and signs, and they say a pledge against racism. This year, the challenge was, how do we do that if everyone's at home? So a couple of things I want to highlight, because I think that they are universal, or they relate to doing events in this time, is that we relied on our past success and our past relationships. We reached out to our partners early. We were very transparent. We told them what not being able to line the streets would mean. But we also wanted them to still communicate the message and still understand the message. We provided them with the tools that they needed. We developed a toolkit that we sent to schools and businesses and libraries and police departments that included social media tips and signs that they could use. We actually had a curriculum that teachers used in their online learning. We held online Zoom discussions, and we invited people to attend those during this week. And then we, as I said, used a lot of social media and invited people to take pictures of themselves and to post those and to organize in whatever way they could at home, on their block, in their neighborhood, etc. And we didn't get 8,000 people to participate, obviously, but we did get about 200. And there were pictures posted. We got the Skokie Review to post things on their website, which brought in a lot of extra attention. So what we learned, I think, is that it's important to be transparent with your audience. It's important to communicate early and often. It's important to get them engaged and connected to what you're doing. And it's very important to keep the focus on the message of your organization, the message and your mission, because that has not changed. In this environment, that remains the same. And we all work for amazing nonprofits doing amazing work. And so communicating that we're still here, we're still doing the same work, I think goes a long way to getting the participation and the fundraising that we all need to do. In my breakout session, I will be talking about, as I said, our largest event, the Race Against Hate, which is a fundraiser and which does bring in a great deal of money, and which we are working on right now and making that more relevant in this environment. So I look forward to seeing those of you that are in that breakout session. Thanks.
Thank you, Walanda, Jill, and Kathy for your insights and introductions. AFP Chicago staff will now be setting up the breakout sessions, and you'll each be moved into your pre-selected session. We'll see you back here in 30 minutes.
Becky, this is Sharon. Allie and I, having planned this, I think that it would be great for us to have each of the three speakers present the content that they were going to share at the beginning of their session, and we can still capture questions in chat and perhaps respond to those after the meeting. So since Jill is up on screen, maybe we could start with Jill.
Okay, great. All right. I think we all can be understanding this is a whole new normal that we're working in. So, all right. Well, I will go ahead and get started. So I think I shared just a few minutes ago that the three things that I'm going to be talking about are navigating for the now, planning for the recovery, and then leading to the new normal. And I didn't come up with these on my own. I stole these actually from a McKinsey article that I read not too long ago. So I think we can move to the second slide now. Great. So when I think about just what's happening in the now, I'll just start with a really quick story that when we were first seeing or thinking about COVID-19, this is actually back at the end of February, and we had just completed a finance luncheon that we were doing, and we were about to have a conversation with our team in the commercial real estate industry about one of the largest events that we do, which would have happened on March 19th. And it's 2,000 people, and it's an award ceremony. And literally between February 28th and March, I would say March 9th, we saw the world turn and things unfold to the extent that we had to send a notice out that we would be postponing that event, which has now been rescheduled for June. But that event is the largest fundraising event we do. It raises about $1.5 million. And that sort of set the stage for a host of things that we really had to think about from a fundraising standpoint. I think, the first thing I would say is that these are really challenging times for all of us, and whether it's like the Food Depository where we're on the front lines, or other organizations that really need to rethink and retool how you're doing things, that it does underscore the importance of our organizations and what the nonprofit sector does. And I can't remember if it was Kathy or Walanda that shared this, but I think it's critically important. I know that we're all missing going to the museum, or being able to have our children in an after-school program, or participate in a counseling session, or having the universities open, or regardless of what the mission is. I think that it's just critically important that those services are available. The second thing that we did was really put together a 30 and 60, 90-day plan. And, I would say that we learned a lot over the last 2.5 months. It certainly amplified the things that we were good at and the opportunities, the areas that we needed to really grow and change. I'm incredibly grateful to the team at the Food Depository for the tremendous work that they've done. It's been a very, very busy 2.5 months. And a few other things that we've learned. One is to just trust your gut, that we all are experts in fundraising and we do know what we're doing, and whether or not we need to repivot or continue to stay on the path that we've on. I think that we absolutely have those skills and can put those forward. The next thing is that I sought out a lot of experts and help. And I think that that's an important part right now, is that we don't need to profess that we know all the answers. And frankly, if I see a good idea, I'm happy to steal it and I'm happy to share it. And then, finally, the other thing is that it's in a very different way than it's been before. It's so hyper local. It's not only hyper local in terms of the state and then the city of Chicago. It's also a hyper local response for your organization, and that's something that's become significantly clear for the Food Depository. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So as we think about the recovery, I think one of the things that's been challenging is that we're living in a gray area now, and as much as it would be wonderful to know exactly how things are going to play itself out, we don't. And the external environment is driving everything right now. And I know that there are very hard decisions that are being made, not only within our organization, but within organizations across the city, across the county, and that some of those, involve having to really think about furloughing staff or laying off staff. In, some instances, organizations are fortunate to be adding staff at this time. And that the importance of resources and technology becomes critically important. Even as we're going through this webinar and trying to figure things out, we realize that we're operating in a completely new normal. There are three things that that we're thinking about in terms of how we can move forward. One is perhaps conducting what's called the SOAR, which is a strength, opportunities, aspiration, and results analysis, and really engaging not only your board and staff in that process. The second is making sure that you have frequent communication, not only internally, but also externally. That has been something that has been critically important as we've moved through the last 2.5 months. Talking to donors is something that I think we have to continue to do and learn and hear from them. Our team has had the opportunity to talk to many, many donors, as I'm sure a number of you have. And as we continue to do that, we learn a lot of things. We learn about what they're thinking about, what's important to them, what insights they might have that can guide the strategies that we put forward. And then finally, when as we're thinking about our budgeting process, which begins in July, one of the things that that we're going to be doing is a top-down budget that will take us through the first quarter of our fiscal year, and then doing a much more detailed bottom-up budget beginning in September. And I think the important piece around that is that it helps us take a little bit more time to understand what's going to happen with the various phases that the governor is going to roll out, how the need is going to shift and change. And for us, because we're the unemployment numbers and the number of people that are out of work is just driving the need for food in our community. It's certainly impacting how we're doing our services and how we think about what the financial implications might be for that. And then finally, it gives us a chance to look a little bit more at what the data has told us, and then also to think more critically about how we need to make adjustments into the future in terms of what our original plans were. One of the things that my team, if they could tell you that we were thinking about, was a doing a planning process that not only looked at, this was prior to COVID-19, not only looking at FY21, but also looking at 22 and 23. We had to throw that out the window. I think that the best thing we can do right now is look at the next 6 months, and then as we think about post-January, make our best guesses towards that. The other thing that we're in the middle of is a big capital campaign, and we paused that in April when we were about to break ground, and have subsequently we'll be re-looking at that project in light of the learnings that we had for COVID-19, because that was a new meal preparation facility as well as a nutrition education center and a variety of other programming that we were going to do, which in many ways is very much still relevant, but also we need to take into consideration the new operating environment. Okay, so then I think we're moved to the final slide. And this is an area where I welcome the opportunity to have conversations with many of you on the call, because I think that this is new uncharted territory in terms of leading into the new normal. I do think it's important to continue to be mindful of what's happening in our operating environment and how much that will influence us, not only thinking about the pending election, but what the long-term recovery is going to look like, how these phases are going to roll out, what the economy is going to be going to do in the near future. Certainly being flexible and being nimble is really important now. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is just how much creativity we've seen, not only from our donors in terms of how they've supported us in just a variety of interesting ways, but also from our team in trying out new and insightful ways that we can engage and communicate with our donors. And then finally, I think the last 2 points I would make is that, one, we have to really take a hard look at what we've done in the past and what strengths we can bring into this new landscape, because not everything that worked before will continue to work in the future. And then the second piece I would say is that partnership with our board and with our leadership team and with the development team is going to be critically important, so that we're all moving in the same direction and understanding what our priorities are. Okay, I will stop there, Becky or Ali, and turn it back over to you.
So there you go, Ali. I was going to say, why don't we just give everybody an update on how we're going to facilitate the rest of the session?
Sure. Sharon and I think it's best, since we're not in the breakout rooms, if we could move ahead as we plan to with the facilitator to facilitate any questions that attendees have in a similar way with the raise hand feature and or the chat feature. So now would be the time, if you do have questions for Jill, that Alexis Cook will help facilitate these.
I wonder if we should go on to Yolanda's presentation.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. We have a question.
Okay.
The question is, Jill, you mentioned new ways of communicating with donors. Could you share some examples?
Sure. We have done a few things. We've done, oh, I realized my video's off. I apologize, guys. We have done webinars. We've been frequently emailing information to donors. We've been, to the extent that individual donors can come down and volunteer at the food depository, that's been another way that we've been able to communicate to donors. And obviously we've called them and had conversations with them. So I would say that those are the primary ways that we've been communicating out to them.
And thank you. That actually is a great lead into Tawanda, whose presentation is about donor stewardship and communication. Thank you so much, Jill and Alexis.
Thank you, Sharon. I am going to share my screen. Let's make sure we can do this properly. How's that, Sharon? Am I good?
You're good. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. My goodness, technology, right? But there's a silver lining. When we were preparing for this, we were talking about the good things that Jill and Kathy would share. And so this way, we all get to see each other. So I'm very, very thankful for that. So today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about donor stewardship and communications. And many people have asked us, Breakthrough, how were we able to pivot so quickly and get our communication out in such a way that was really impactful. And you guys bear with me, I can't see your questions. So Sharon, if some come through, then I guess when we get to that time, you can let me know. Thank you. There is one thing that I do want to say before I even get into all of this. Breakthrough just has a really, really phenomenal team and really great leadership in our lowest setter. I'll talk about that a little bit. And our communications team, our individuals team, our volunteer team, and even our program staff have just really pulled together. And it wasn't one person that was really able to get the results that we got, but it was just a collective effort being led by our marketing and communications director to really kind of land us where we are today. Prior to COVID, though, there were some key things that I began to just kind of share with the team. I started in 2014, and the way that our messaging was at that time, we recognized that at that point we needed to pivot and have moved from more of a need-based approach to a hope-centered approach in our messaging. We didn't get it right all the time, but we worked really, really hard and were really, really intentional about how we would do that. And so I would gather the team together and just get their feedback, and we all just really tried to come up with a way on how we can move to that. Now, again, this is pre-COVID, so we probably started working on this in 2015, 2016, and instead of, you know, as we talk about donor cultivation and stewardship, instead of the messaging starting with the donors and the appeal and thinking about what they wanted to hear, what we did was say, let the message just be very authentic, let the message be true. Let's put the messaging in the center, and whatever stories there were, we would tailor that messaging to each audience. And so, and literally this graph that I have here is the image that I put on the board for the team. And so what this caused us to do was to be very authentic and to have those voices be very, very, every voice to be heard, and really work with our program staff to make sure that people were honored. That then turned into how we communicated with our donors, how we communicated with our volunteers, our participants, our community, our board, and of course, our institutional audience. From that point, we determined that the message would drive everything. It would drive all of our communications, how we communicated and everything, instead of letting the donor or the need drive everything. And you'll see how that played out when we got to COVID and tailoring our messages for that. The next thing that happened pre-COVID, again, this is back in 2015, 2016, was really looking at our team. Our team went through a lot of changes, and I just wanted to take a moment to reiterate this because it's so important to have the right people in the right place at the right time. A lot of people look at may look at Breakthrough Now and say, oh, their messaging is so good, and or they really did it right, which I don't know that I can say that we got it 100% right, but I do want to acknowledge that having the right people on the bus at the right time. I'm really, and the team will tell you, I'm really slow to hire. I just want to make sure that the people that we add to the team, that they are supposed to be here in this season. And what happens is it creates a culture where the team thrives, their own giftedness begin to shine through. And that's what we saw with our marketing and communications team, from the graphic designer to writers to how it was being led by our director in that area. What we also saw at that time is that it developed this really beautiful, authentic relationship between our development team and our program staff. So every time every time there was messages to be told, there was a level of equity, there was a level of value, there was a level of trust. We got to a point, and you can even see through the COVID communications, and we'll talk about this, how where the program staff, it was okay, it was a safe place for them to push back and say, okay, well, that message doesn't feel as honoring, how can we do it in a different way? So I just want to make sure that it's reiterated that this is not something that happened overnight. We just worked on these things, and as a result of working and doing the hard internal work, pre-COVID, it lended to where we landed when COVID happened. Then COVID happened. The other thing that I do want to say is that our executive director, Arloa Sutter, really, her leadership 7 days before the shelter-in-place order happened, she was just really, really bold, really courageous, and very vulnerable. And she really said, hey, we need to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. Let's create a task force. I don't have all the answers. No one team has all the answers. Let's all get in a room together, develop this task force, and let's work through everything. And so we had a task force meeting. I want to say that was Friday, March 13th. I think the shelter-in-place order happened, March 20th, that following Saturday. So 7 days prior to that order, she got us all in the room for shelter-in-place. Got us all in the room, developed this task force. Key decisions were made throughout the entire organization. Not only were those key decisions made, but intentional communications were developed at that meeting, which was important. What it allowed us to do is not just have our communications team developing messaging, everybody's voice was heard. And because that model, for the most part, already existed, it was easy to adopt everybody's voice and make sure that it was shared. And then she was really adamant that we meet every day for the next 6 to 8 weeks, which we've done for the most part. All right. Now, there are some things that worked really, we've recognized that had the strongest response. Our Eblasts were really, really great. Typically, we'll have maybe about a 14% open rate. When we sent out those first Eblasts, we had a 25% open rate, which was really amazing. But we were really intentional. And remember, I said that the message drives everything for us. So we segmented, we tailored it was the same message, but we segmented it. We segmented those messages and tailored them for specific audiences. So in that task force meeting, we decided a message will go to the board, to the staff, to the insiders, from the executive director, to our volunteers, the broader audience. And I also want to say here, we were planning on doing an appeal to our recurring donors so that we can have a touch point with them. We decided not to do that appeal, but we used that same message, and instead of having it come from our executive director, we had it come from our individual team associate director to go to those recurring donors so that we can still maintain course and connect with them. Next, strategies that we found that have been really, really effective. In addition to sending that first Eblast to all of those different groups. We also began to communicate from everything that was happening on the front lines, right? And again, these were stories of hope, not stories of need. And these were basic, authentic. We would have our teams just snap pictures from, you know, if they were loading groceries in their car, if they were going to visit our families. These are just very natural, authentic conversations that were happening from the front lines, and we were really excited about that. We also decided to do a live group Zoom, and this is where we had our executive director to connect with our insiders. We had our staff to talk about what was happening on the front lines. We also did a special live group Zoom with our volunteers. And then we've begun to do one-on-one touch points with our donors to cultivate our relationships. For us, we decided not to make any asks. We just intentionally wanted to connect with them and see how they were doing. They're our friends. And I think that they realized that, and we've begun to get a really beautiful response from that.
Yolanda, I just want to jump in here so we can switch to our next topic and ask, who was on the task force? Was it leadership, or were there others from throughout the organization?
Yeah, leadership. So we have our executive leadership team, which is our chief development officers for both our adult support network and our youth network, myself, and our executive director, and our chief administrative officer. But we also had key people. We have a second layer of leadership, staff leadership team. So key people who were directors or senior directors throughout the organization, key people on the program staff, and everybody's voice was there.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Kathy and Elizabeth, I think we're ready for you to share about special events. Thank you so much, Yolanda.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth, if you can turn on your video, great. And Kathy, great.
Yes, hello again. So I'm going to talk about how we pivoted with our largest special event. The Race Against Hate is a big fundraiser in our organization. We raise about $300,000 a year. We get about 5,000 runners and walkers to participate, and we honor the memory of Ricky Birdsong, who some of you may know who he was. He was the head basketball coach at Northwestern University. He was killed by a white supremacist in his neighborhood as he was walking down the street with his children. And that person went on to kill 3 more people in the Chicago area. This was back in 1999. Ricky Birdsong's family created a foundation, and they actually started the race. They wanted to do something to honor Ricky's memory. He was very much into sports and youth, and they thought that having a 5K race would honor his memory and bring forth the message of equity and peace and justice. In 2006, we took over the race, and we've been hosting it since then. And as I said, it has become our largest fundraiser. So I highlight all that to say that we felt like we had to do the race. If you can go to the next slide. We did consider other strategies, but and I want to talk about a few of those. So first of all, we did think about canceling the race, and again, you know, I'm talking about the Race Against Hate, which is, you know, important to us, but I think these ideas, you know, are transferable across all special events. And I think the first question that many of us are asking regarding our events is, do we cancel? Do we just not do it in this age of COVID? we looked at that and said, well, no, we don't want to cancel because we would lose much needed revenue. And everyone is scrambling right now, I think, with budgets and with fundraising at this time. And so for us, that was not an option. We considered postponing the race actually as well. It will take place on Father's Day, June 21st. And so we thought about, well, maybe we should postpone it to September, to October. We decided not to do that as well because we felt like that would cannibalize next year's race in 2021, in fiscal year 2021. And would we be able to bring people out again, assuming that we can all come together? Would we be able to get our sponsors back, et cetera? So postponing the race was not an option as well. We thought about doing a virtual race. We did research. There are lots of races across the country that have gone virtual, some right here in Chicago. We decided that we don't have the bandwidth to do a virtual race. It's actually not cost-free. It can be expensive to do that. Participants still expect their t-shirts and the swag and a lot of other things that you need to do. Also, the runners, the real runners who participate, they also expect their times, et cetera. And that can get expensive and complicated, and we don't have the bandwidth within our development department to handle that. So we nixed that idea as well. What we decided to do was to reimagine the race and to focus on our core message. So we are planning what's called Race Against Hate in Place. And we are focusing on our core message, the core message of the event, which is healing, community, and equity. We will be communicating about the race for the month of June, as opposed to just one day. We are communicating this throughout the month of June with the highlight, if you will, being on June 21st. We're also being transparent with our audience about the financial impact. Losing the revenue from the race will affect critical programs. It will affect our violence prevention programs. It will affect our racial equity programs. It will affect our domestic violence programs. So we need the revenue, and we're not shy about saying that. And while people come together to race together, to be in community with one another, they enjoy the race. It's along the lakefront. It's a beautiful course. We know from our past history that people also come to the race and participate in the race because of the message, because of our mission as an organization, because of their desire to contribute to racial equity. So we are being transparent about that. We are creating opportunities for participants to engage and connect. Again, we are all sheltering in place. We know that. We don't know what the world will look like in June. Right now, it looks like some restrictions may be lifted, but you know, people may or may not be ready to actually get out in the streets. So we are assuming that people will still be sheltering in place. We're asking people to wear their race t-shirt. We have 21 years of race t-shirts and a history of doing the race. It's going to be so much fun seeing people in the community just, you know, out along, you know, in their daily lives wearing their race t-shirts. We're asking participants to go ahead and do a 5K, run or walk 3.2 miles anytime between June 1st and June 21st. We're excited about that as well. I should say one thing that I missed, that we are asking people to register for the race and turn their registrations into donations. So registration is $44. We're asking folks to make that a donation. Become a race hero. Become a race buddy at a certain level. Become a race champion at $2,500 or more. So I do want to mention that there's certainly a big fundraising aspect. But back to the engagement, we're asking folks to take pictures of themselves using the hashtag Race Against Hate and post that on social media. Again, trying to build a virtual community and to build that connection. We are hosting 3 live virtual events during the month of June that folks can tune into. We are hosting a racial healing circle. We're hosting a brown bag lunch where we will talk about the impact of COVID-19 on Black and brown communities. And we are hosting also a virtual interview with Sherilyn Birdsong, the widow of Ricky Birdsong, who now lives in Atlanta, Georgia. We did that last year. Sherilyn comes to the race every year. We hosted a breakfast with her and we got a tremendous response. People want to be in her presence. People want to connect with her. So we're hoping that they will want to connect virtually as well. So those are
so wonderful. Sorry, I'm just gonna really quickly interject. We just have a couple minutes left, and I think you're touching on something really important that I know our special events breakout group wants to hear, which is sort of those virtual layers and virtual synergies. So I think you're bringing some great examples up of how you've used the Race Against Hate in a virtual setting. Can you speak a little bit to events that you don't think should go virtual, or events that you do think are more well suited to go virtual?
You know, I actually think that you can take any event virtual. What I do think you have to do is adjust your expectations, adjust your revenue expectations. We are under no illusion that we're going to raise $300,000 doing the Race Against Hate virtually. We know that is not going to happen. As we look toward the future to our annual gala, where which is also a significant fundraiser, we're adjusting our expectations and accounting for that in our budgeting. So, we view events in general as, yes, as fundraisers, but also as opportunities to build community and to connect with donors. I don't think that goes away. I think even virtual events are still great opportunities to connect. I also think you have to change the way you think about them. It cannot be a one and done. Okay, I think that you really need to, as I said, communicate early and often. Maybe it's a week long. Maybe people are able to log in when they can log in to participate virtually in the event. But it's not a one night thing as a gala usually is, right? It has to be an ongoing communication and connection with your donor community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'll just share so quickly. Kathy and I took the time for the special events breakout session to actually compile some examples of virtual galas that are online now from a variety of sectors. So we will share those out with the group after our session today so that everyone can see those resources and examples of communication with virtual events, websites, and platforms that seem to be working well for things like paddle raises and silent auctions and videos, and really sharing that mission like Kathy spoke to. So thank you.
Thank you both so much. And thank you to all of our speakers and all of our facilitators. We're going to plan to review questions that our speakers weren't able to answer due to our quick change in format, condense them to similar themes, and find a way to provide ideas and answers to each of you. We're really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. And we appreciate you sticking with us as we navigated some technical difficulties. So thank you again. We appreciate the opportunity to collaborate, and we hope you've left with a few insights for your organization for the future during this ambiguous time. You will be sent an evaluation electronically this afternoon, and we encourage you to complete the evaluation so the Continuous Learning Council can work to improve programming topics and meet your needs. Please continue to check the AFP Chicago website and watch for emails as information about our programming is constantly being updated. Thank you, Walanda, Jill, and Kathy, for your time, efforts, and expertise. And finally, thank you to all of you for joining us today and for your patience. We hope that we're able to get together with all of you sooner than later. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and stay healthy and well.